Overall, across the board, you can see that we had a reduction of inventory. Freehold side, I think we could more or less say that it is a balanced market. We had a higher sales to listings ratio, 56%. It's not a huge difference. Hello, this is Amir Kiabi with Harvey Callis Real Estate, here to give you an update in terms of what went on in Toronto's residential real estate market for the month of February. We've had a change of sentiment, I think, started in December. It did continue into January activity. Let's see what happened with February. The first slide that I'm sharing with you is, as usual, the number of transactions. So that's one way of gauging the activity of the market. So compared to last year, February, overall we had 10% more transactions. It was 15% more transactions on the freehold side, and we had 6% more transactions on the condo side. I also think it's important to take into account the number of listings that were being offered, and then, okay, what percentage of those properties that were being offered was sold, sales to listings ratios, so between the number of transactions and the portion of properties being transacted versus listings. Those two are, I think, important to take a look at together to have a good perspective of the market. So the number of new properties that were offered on the next slide, we had 33% more condos being offered. We had almost 22% more freehold properties being offered, which resulted in a sales to listings ratio of 54% on the freehold side. So this year we had a higher sales to listings ratio of 56%. It's not a huge difference, it's almost the same, but I think the difference on the condo side is significant. So last year we had 50% of condo listings that were offered were sold, but this year the number was 39%. So even though we had more transactions on the condo side, I think it's also important to say that a lower portion of listings that were offered this year were sold compared to last year for condos. I don't think for freehold properties the difference is that important, but for condos, I think we are still in buyer's market territory, in my opinion. On the left side of the slide, you will see the same numbers, same ratios for January. Moving on, this slide is showing you the number of freehold properties that were being offered for the month of February, going back 12 years in Toronto. Had about just shy of 1,600 properties, freehold properties being offered February of this year, which was higher than last year. Last year was almost 1,300. So we had more sellers participating in the market. And then we also had, which corresponded with more buyers also participating, more or less the same ratio as last year. So if you see here, this is the sales to listings ratios for the month of February going back 12 years. And we had this year we had a slightly lower number, only 54% comparing to 56%, for example, to last year. But the linear trend line is almost flat. It's not a huge deviation from normal. The number of transactions may be, I mean, if you look at the slide again, 844 transactions is not necessarily a high number of transactions for the month of February, historically speaking, but it is an improvement. So buyers and sellers together participated more in the market this year than last year. Sellers slightly more. When you look at the condo numbers, we had a lot more sellers entering the market as opposed to buyers, which resulted in a sales to listings ratio of 40%. This slide is showing you the ratio going back to 12 years, which this year we had the lowest. So to me, condo market is still in buyer's market territory. On the freehold side, I think we could more or less say that it is a balanced market, depending on what type of a freehold property you're offering. If you're offering a semi-detached, we'll look at the numbers in terms of months of inventory too, because that's important. For semi-detached properties, you're pretty much in a seller's market. For detached properties, you're still in a seller's market. Moving on, this slide is showing you the average sale prices comparing to last year. I don't like it, but people pay attention to average prices, so are covered, but they don't mean anything. I think you have to look at each class of property and each location to form an opinion in terms of price movement. But we had a 4% decline for average prices for freehold properties in Toronto compared to last year, 1% decline for average prices for condos. Left side of the slide will show you the same concept for January. This slide is showing you MLS house price index for single family properties. So this is a more universal way of tracking price movement. And you could say for single family properties in Toronto, we're more or less the same level as last year, February, which was the case for January numbers too. We didn't see a significant movement year over year. We did see a jump in terms of prices for single family properties from January to February, but that was to be expected. We are getting into the peak activity of the market, and with more activity you expect to have higher index prices, and that's been established when you look at the historical norm. Next slide is showing you the same concept for index prices for apartments and townhouses in Toronto. We had a slight decline for index prices for those two categories. This slide is showing you how many days it took for a property to be sold in Toronto, and it took longer. It took 12% longer this year compared to last year. It took 37 days for a property to be sold on average. This number is different depending on which pockets of the Toronto market you're in and which type of a property you're offering it. Moving on, this slide is showing you the months of inventory across different classifications of properties that I've calculated on March 6th versus February 6th. So overall, across the board, you can see that we had a reduction of inventory. And that usually translates into the market moving direction of seller's benefit. One thing that was surprising to me was the sheer decline of inventory on freehold properties, both on above 2.5 and under $2.5 million. We had a lot of transactions, almost twice as many transactions on above $2.5 million range for freehold properties. So we averaged just shy of 6 months of inventory as opposed to 10.2 months of inventory last month. And for freehold properties under 2.5 million, we are at 1.5 months of inventory. And that to me is seller's market territory. We have about 50% sales to listings ratio, 1.5 months of inventory. That is a seller's market territory. Less so if you're in condo. Obviously, to me, in the condo market, combination of 3.7 months of inventory and a very low sales to listings ratio, to me, that's buyer's market. And the lowest amount of inventory obviously is in Toronto for semi-detached properties. So if you're selling a semi-detached property, you basically dictate the direction that you want the market to go right now. A lot of demand for that. Overall in Toronto, we went from 3.6 months of inventory to 2.9 months of inventory. Next slide is showing you the same concept, but I have January, February, and March inventory levels just to give you month over month perspective. And lastly, I want to cover what's happening with average rental prices in Toronto. So for freehold properties, we had a slight increase. We are at $3,400 average rent for freehold properties per month. For condos, we had a slight decline actually. We just shy of $2,800 for average rent prices for condos. And that will conclude my update for the month of February. I hope you find the information helpful. If you had any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Take care.